Caribbean and the Pacific.
Yeah, we're going to get the latest on that story now. For weeks, the Trump administration has faced growing pressure over its actions in Caribbean waters. And today, the president's top foreign and diplomatic cabinet officials were again on Capitol Hill, briefing lawmakers on the escalation of US military force in the region. The US government has long maintained this is about stopping drug trafficking chains, but it's faced accusations, including from the Venezuelan leader, that it's instead pursuing regime change.
This comes as the Pentagon released footage of a series of new attacks on vessels in the Eastern Pacific. Now, these strikes have caused unease in Congress about the legality of the campaign, which has now destroyed at least 26 boats and killed more than 90 people. At the heart of this latest scrutiny is a strike from the 2nd of September, in which a vessel was struck a second time, killing 2 survivors of the initial attack.
Well, there have been calls for that video to be made public. Today, the Defence Secretary said for now that's not happening.
We're also going to tomorrow allow the HASC and SASC to see the unedited video of the September 2nd, alongside with Admiral Bradley, who has done a fantastic job, has made all the right calls, and we're glad he'll be there to do it. But in keeping with long-standing Department of War policy, Department of Defense policy, of course, we're not going to release a top secret full unedited video of that to the general public. HASC and SASC and appropriate committees will see it, but not the general public.
Well, let's speak a little bit more about the issues involved here and just what is causing that controversy. We're joined by Brian Fonseca. He's a retired US Marine, now director of the Institute for Public Policy at Florida International University. Thanks for being with us here on BBC News. First of all, on that decision from the War Secretary, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth, that he's not going to make public this bit of video from the 2nd of September, what do you make of that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways it's sort of a defensive mechanism to ensure that the video doesn't make its way to the public. Again, this issue of targeting boats is sort of playing out in 2 courts. First is the sort of court of justice to determine the legality of these strikes, both at the international and domestic court level. At the same time, it's also playing out in the court of public opinion. And we've seen polls across the United States that certainly suggest that Americans are not supportive of leveraging the military in a lethal context against criminal organizations like the way the Trump administration is deploying that now. And so I think there may be some apprehension to do that on one end. On the other end, it is probably a classified document, so it has to go through a sequencing of declassification in order to release it to the public, which could happen. But the Secretary of War is essentially admitting he's not prepared to make that action possible.
Do you think that he should be sharing more information, even if it is just with a select few on Capitol Hill? We've heard calls from Republicans and Democrats that they're just not being told enough about this operation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there certainly should be some sharing with those that hold clearances, that can have access to classified information. I mean, it's not tradition that you release a whole lot of evidence in pursuit of using the military to the public domain. You think about sort of the foreign terrorist organization designation that the United States is using to target criminals. You wouldn't necessarily publicly share information in advance of targeting in a conventional military context. And so there's a little bit of gray area here in terms of at what point do you share evidence to support military action that you're taking in a lethal way. At the same time, to the point, I do think that there should be some sharing that occurs with members of the U.S. government, members of Congress that do hold clearances that could access information at the top secret level.
In the case of September 2nd, the accusation being levelled is that potentially Secretary Hegseth and perhaps others in the administration are guilty of a war crime because there were 2 shipwrecked individuals, and that's even in the Navy's own policy of things it doesn't do. Should more information be put out there, notwithstanding what you've said, just to get to the bottom of that one?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the U.S. Congress, U.S. government, even sort of the American people should be thorough in terms of whether or not the United States is acting just in the context of which we're deploying military force right now. That's not to say that there's going to be any grounds for necessarily, a criminal, sort of case against the Secretary of War for for war crimes. But certainly the United States needs to do its due diligence to ensure that we're playing by the rules of the game, the rules of engagement in this particular case, and how we're leveraging the military as an instrument of power to advance foreign policy interests.
So using your own military knowledge and international relations, does this look more to you like it is combating narco-terrorism, as we hear from the administration, or does it look more like regime change, an effort to remove Nicolás Maduro from power?
So it's a great question. And I tend to think it's both. I mean, I think that this is certainly about regime change. I have no doubts that the slow mobilization and pressurization, leveraging massive military muscle in the Caribbean, is designed to shake the Venezuelan government at its core in the hopes that it's going to get a fracture and that some type of transition event is going to occur, a palace coup in which the military seizes power because they don't want to face the Americans in a conventional war, or more of a political elite fracture in which some negotiated transition of Maduro occurs. I think that is absolutely part of this buildup. At the same time, the Americans have the opportunity to target narco-terrorism in a region with a very sort of low threshold or low barrier of entry in using the U.S. military. And what I mean by that is the U.S. military is now being deployed against cartels designated as foreign terrorist organizations. It would be very difficult to deploy the military in the same context in places like Mexico or Central America. And so deploying it off the coast of Venezuela, with a country that's already fairly isolated, is a low barrier of entry for leveraging the American military to target narco-terrorism. So I do think at the end of the day, it's both. It's targeting narco-terrorism in a way that's suitable, and then, of course, putting pressure on the regime in the hope of a fracture.
OK, lots to think about and talk about there with our panel. Dr. Brian Fonseca, thank you very much for joining us on BBC News.
Yeah, let's bring in